before stock cubes, before cough drops, before air fresheners, and before the supermarket gave us herbs in plastic packets. There was a small patch of plants outside the kitchen door. These were not simply herbs for flavor. They were herbs for memory, for medicine, for fragrance, for food, and for survival through the long months when nothing else was fresh. They flavored ale. They stood in for celery. They gave salads a cucumber taste in winter. They sweetened sour fruit before sugar was something every household could afford. They kept moths from clothes, drove flies from kitchens, and lived inside cough candy that your great-grandparents may have known better than you do. But many of these herbs have almost disappeared from modern gardens. And the last plant on this list, the one we have saved for the very end, was once used to protect the house. Until people began remembering exactly why it could also be dangerous. This video is about plant history, garden memory, and old household uses. It is not medical advice. Some of these herbs deserve a careful return. Others were forgotten for a reason. Do not eat, brew, or use any unfamiliar herb unless you are completely certain of its identification and safety. Costmary. Its real name is Costmary, but people also called it alicost, Bible leaf, and balsam herb, and each name tells you something true. Alicost, because before hops dominated brewing, Costmary leaves went into the pot. They gave ale a faint minty bitterness that kept the drink from going flat. Bible leaf, because churchgoers on long Sunday mornings would tuck a single leaf between the pages. The scent, cool and camphor-edged, helped keep them awake when the sermon stretched past any reasonable hour. Brewing changed, church habits changed, and Costmary, tall, silver green, faintly resinous, drifted quietly out of fashion. 2. Lovage. If you have ever grown lovage, you know the first thing that happens. Someone brushes a leaf and stops because the smell hits all at once. Deep, green, unmistakably celery, but louder and wilder than anything you have bought at a store. Lovage was a working herb. Its leaves went into soups, broths, and slow-cooked stews, bringing the depth of flavor that a stock cube now gives in seconds. Its stems were eaten like celery. Its seeds were dried as a warming spice. Lovage leaves can be used in small culinary amounts by healthy adults. Avoid the root. Those who are pregnant, on medication, or managing kidney or heart conditions should not consume it. Then stock cubes arrived, then modern celery. And a plant that had once stood in for an entire shelf of flavors became too tall, too strong, too much itself for the modern kitchen garden. 3. Salad burnet is not dramatic. It sits low and quiet, its small paired leaves arranged like the rungs of a very fine ladder. But crush one of those leaves between your fingers, or better, taste it. What you get is not what you expect from a dry-looking perennial. What you get is cucumber. Fresh, cool, unmistakable cucumber. Its young leaves went into salads when cucumbers were not always available. They went into herb butter, into vinegar, into the summer drinks that polite households served to visitors. Cucumbers became available year-round. Salad greens came pre-washed and pre-packaged. The subtle coolness of salad burnet was no longer something anyone needed, though it still grows in old cottage gardens, evergreen even in frost. 4. Good King Henry. The name is cheerful, but do not let it mislead you. Good King Henry was not a decorative plant. It was not even quite an herb in the modern supermarket sense. It was something older and more practical. A perennial kitchen plant. Its leaves were cooked like spinach before spinach became the standard. Its tender spring shoots, sometimes called poor man's asparagus, were eaten as a vegetable in their own right. It grew back every year without replanting, and was ready while the rest of the garden was still waking up. Do not forage this plant from the wild. Grow from trusted seed or nursery stock only. Faster crops took its place. The annual market had no room for perennial kitchen plants that required patience. And good King Henry, faithful, generous, entirely undemanding, was quietly left behind. 5. Sweet Cicely. Sweet Cicely is a plant that rewards you the moment you touch it. The leaves are soft, finely cut, almost fern-like, and they smell of anise, of licorice, of something sweet and clean that feels entirely out of place on a hardy perennial herb. The old cooks who grew it knew exactly what they were doing. Rhubarb was sharp, gooseberries were mouth-puckering, and sugar was expensive. Sweet Cicely leaves cooked alongside sour fruit softened the sharpness. The flavor became rounder. You needed less sugar, sometimes almost none. When sugar became cheap, the reason to grow Sweet Cicely became less obvious. Vanilla, pre-made crumbles, tinned fruit, the whole machinery of sweetness industrialized, and a plant that had solved a real culinary problem for centuries became a garden curiosity. It still thrives in shaded cottage gardens. The bees still find it in early spring. And if you grow rhubarb and you find Sweet Cicely nearby, you are holding old kitchen knowledge that most people have simply forgotten to pass on. 6. Southernwood is beautiful to look at, delicate, silvery, its foliage so finely cut that it catches the light like soft lace. But touch it, and the smell that rises is sharp, resinous, unmistakably medicinal. This is not a gentle herb, it means business. Southernwood was a household herb, not a modern culinary herb. It was tucked between folded sheets and good woolen coats. Moths were thought to avoid its strong aromatic scent, which made it useful in drawers, linens, and wool storage. In an era before mothballs, before chemical repellents, before sealed plastic storage bags, Southernwood was the answer to a very real domestic problem. The 20th century gave households something easier. Mothballs were cheap and required no garden. Air fresheners came in aerosol cans. Scented drawer liners arrived in wax paper packages, the old knowledge of which plants repelled which pests and how to use them faded within a generation or two, and Southernwood became just another silver plant in the border that nobody could quite name. 7. Horehound. If you spent time with grandparents who kept a tin of old-fashioned sweets in the kitchen drawer, you may already know Horehound. Not the plant, but the flavor. Horehound candy is deeply, almost defiantly bitter, the kind of flavor that makes you pay attention. And for generations, that was precisely the point. The candy was made from the plant, and the plant was kept for exactly this purpose. White Horehound had a long history as a folk remedy plant. Teas and syrups were made from it and given to children through coughs and colds. The point is not whether they worked. This is plant history, not a reason to treat a cough with a garden herb. The point is that this plant was woven so deeply into ordinary domestic life that it survived inside a piece of candy. Industrial medicine replaced the household remedy. Branded cough drops replaced the handmade sweet, and the plant that started all of it was left behind. 8. Elecampane. Most forgotten herbs are small and modest. Elecampane is neither. It can grow to 6 feet, sometimes taller. Its leaves are coarse and enormous. Its flowers are sharp, bright yellow, like small suns on a tall stem. This was a plant that announced itself. This was less a cooking herb and more a plant from the old home apothecary. Its roots had a long tradition in European folk medicine, and there are records of candied elecampane root made in earlier centuries. Sitting in the blurred zone where kitchen garden and medicine garden were not yet separate, the root should not be used for medicinal purposes without professional guidance. This video presents elecampane as a historical and ornamental plant only. Too large for most modern borders, too medicinal for casual use. Elecampane found no comfortable place in the contemporary garden. But it grows beautifully where space allows. Pollinators find its flowers. And it carries a history most people have simply never been told. 9 Hyssop is one of the oldest named herbs in Western literature. It appears in the Bible, in ancient Greek texts, in the monastery gardens of medieval Europe, in Renaissance herb books. And then, somewhere along the way, it quietly left most of our gardens. It is intensely aromatic, somewhere between thyme and mint and sage, with a slight bitterness the old cooks knew how to use. It went into soups and meat dishes. It flavored drinks. There are European liqueurs that carry hyssop still, if you know where to look. It was used in teas, in the old household tradition that treated every aromatic plant as both a flavoring and a kind of gentle household remedy. The modern spice rack filled its positions with thyme, rosemary, sage, and mint. Hyssop, which had played several roles at once for most of its long history, found itself without a clear seat at the table. But the bees have not forgotten. On a warm afternoon in late summer, a border of hyssop in full flower will pull pollinators from a remarkable distance. Some forms of knowledge survive outside the kitchen. 10 Tansy. We have reached the last herb on this list. And we have saved it for last because it earns its place here, not as a return recommendation, but as the plant that explains why the word forgotten does not always carry the meaning we think it does. Tansy was once a household plant with a serious domestic reputation. It was used as a strewing herb, scattered on floors, hung in rooms, placed near doorways, because its camphor-sharp scent drove flies, fleas, and other insects from living spaces. Before screens on windows and chemical insect control, this was a plant with a practical daily purpose. And then the understanding deepened. The toxic compounds in tansy, principally thujone, became better understood. The historical uses that involved ingesting the plant were recognized as genuinely dangerous, particularly for pregnant women and for children and livestock who might encounter it. Do not eat tansy. Do not make preparations from it. Keep away from children, pets, and livestock. In some regions, it is classified invasive. Check local guidance before planting. Tansy holds a story worth understanding, but the story includes the full truth, that this plant was not simply forgotten. It was, with time, correctly set aside. That is why forgotten does not always mean innocent. 10 plants, 10 forgotten names, 10 different stories about how people once lived alongside plants in a way that was practical, personal, and deeply embedded in ordinary daily life. The old kitchen garden was not just a place to grow food. It was a living cupboard, a medicine shelf, a spice rack, a scent drawer, and a memory of how people once knew what grew near them and what each plant was for. Some of these herbs deserve a careful return. Others should only be remembered, approached with the respect they earned, and the honesty that says, not everything that came before us was better. Some things were simply older. Which of these forgotten herbs surprised you the most? Tell us in the comments. And if you enjoy discovering the hidden stories behind ordinary plants, subscribe to Rooted Wonders for more stories from the living world.